What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful night tonight. Beautiful night. Lipton. I just made Lipton tea. Delicious. I don't know, but I believe from past experiences this is going to be delicious again. Delicious. So today I was thinking about somebody I knew when I was a kid, and this individual was very gung-ho. He was short. At least later on it turned out that he was short. When I knew him as a kid, he looked tall to me. But anyway, so he was one of those, he had Joe Pesci syndrome, in my opinion. He had to be the best at everything. He took karate. I remember he was a black belt early on. He was very intense in his life. So in my town, in my city there, all the streets were paved. But there was one street that wasn't, and it was a private way. And as kids, we discovered that. I discovered it, and then I brought all my friends over there, and we would hang around on that street all day. And I called it Bumpy Street because it was bumpy. So it was a street that was neglected. There was potholes everywhere. It was like, who knows when the last time they paved that was, maybe 50 years before. It was all torn up. And there was one rock that stuck out of the ground, and it was in the shape of a ramp. This granite rock stuck out, very smooth. And I found it, and I told everybody we're going to use that rock and jump over it, or jump on it as a ramp. So we would measure by where the back tire would land, because that's how we jump normally. The back tire would hit first, then we'd, tilt forward. If you did it the other way, you'd go over the handlebars. So that was our place. We'd hang out there a lot, especially after, after a certain time on Saturdays. But in the summertime, we were there all the time. And I remember the top corner house lived an old lady. And every once in a while, you'd see her sitting there with the window open, but the screen was, there kind of obstructing your view a little bit. And she would say, "What are you guys doing today?" And say, "We're playing." And then I remember one time they dropped asphalt. And like maybe like 5x3 area, they must have had extra on the truck, and they dumped it there and they squashed it, but it was soft. When I got there, it was still hot. So I took rocks and I put my initials in there. I don't know if it's still there now. So anyway, that area, somebody buzzing here. That area looked totally different than the rest of the rest of the area where I lived. It kind of looked like I was in a country, like in the deep south. So you'd go down that road, and on the right hand side there was a house. First of all, in the top corner there was a garage that was falling apart. We'd hang out in there, but then you went a little further down, it was a house, big property. I mean, it was big, probably like 3 times the size of all the other properties, and that was unusual. And he had a fence in the front, looked like we were in Alabama. His mama's boy going home, get a little kiss on the cheek from his mama. So I would always look at that house, I go, that house doesn't look like it belongs here. It looks like it's like from the deep south. The house itself, the land, everything. The only thing that was missing was like a bunch of cows. So a little further up was a stone in the ground. And then there was that corner house with the old lady. On the other side, there was a brown house, had property on the side with a trail cutting through it. And there was a lady who owned that building, that house. It was I think it was a 3-decker, 3-family. And I met her, this is way back when I was a kid. I met her, and her name was Helen. And she had this dog she'd walk. And Helen looked like an actress from the 1940s, that kind of hairstyle and that kind of look. She looked like I used to look at her, I go, it looks like an actress from 1943. So she was there, and then if you went down the side street, there was another house on the corner there, and that house looked like deep south. It had one of those country fences going around, and big yard with one of those old-fashioned swings. I remember one time they had relatives that were visiting them, and those relatives had children, and they called us in and we played baseball with them. So if you went further down that road, now it was paved, that road, and I would hang around. There was this family, Italian family there, and they had these two young kids, and we'd play with them. And the thing that would happen once a week, a van would pull up, and the van had 3 or 4 people in it, and they were karate instructors. One of them was that kid. He's not a kid anymore, but he was a kid then. And he was there, and he would teach karate in the back of one of the houses in their backyard. All the neighbors would gather, and they would teach classes. They would teach a karate class back there. I think it was every Wednesday. So that was when I was really young. So now fast forward, I'm in high school. I'm a little bit older, and a friend of mine, he's interested in doing that karate fighting. You know, that point, half point thing, which is not really fighting, but okay, it's fighting, but it's point fighting. It's not like full contact. I don't want to offend the karate people out there. But anyway, so one day he said, yeah, you know, I'm thinking of doing a tournament. And he goes, you want to come along? And I said, sure. So I went. I think it was in either Connecticut or Long Island, New York. And I remember we had to drive a little bit. So we get there. He does his tournament. And then at the end, we start noticing people that we knew from the past. One of them was that kid that would teach karate in back of those people's yards, one of the yards. And now I'm looking at him kind of like funny and in disbelief at the same time. I'm looking at him. I said to my friend, do you remember him being that short? He goes, no. He goes, that's crazy. He's short. I don't know why we had this fake memory. Maybe it wasn't a fake memory. Maybe it was because we were young back then. We were short. And compared to us, he was a little bit taller. So we thought he was like really tall. So we see him and he looks like he's about 5'4", 5'3", around there. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, the face matched. And I knew it was him. So my friend, you know, he went over there and kind of like said, hey. And he go, hey, how you doing? Because he recognized him. And they started chit-chatting there about different things. And then we were talking about it later in the car. I was like, can you believe he's that short? It's no problem being short. It's just that we had this image of him being, you know, 5'10" to 6 feet tall when we were younger. And then, you know, it's like, imagine you have a friend or you know somebody and you haven't seen him in a few years. And your memory has this image of this person as being about 6 feet tall. Then when you run into them, they're actually 5'5". It's tough to wrap your mind around it for a little bit. So, yeah, I was thinking about that. I go, man, you know, I remember him, and when I used to hang around in that area with the street, you know, all broken up, and he would jump out of that van, he looked tall to me. But he was a good karate kid, karate guy. Delicious. All those guys that used to teach karate in my neighborhood, the old men, if they're even around, they have to be, most of them have to be late 70s, early 80s at the minimum. Should have brought a bigger cup. But those were fun days. And then I remember one particular summer, I'd watch 2 episodes of Alice, 2 episodes of The Jeffersons, and then I'd go out and play all day. So I'd get up in the morning, summertime, have my windows open, that nice summer air would come in, and have some breakfast, Thomas's English muffins or something. And then I'd watch 2 hours in the morning, 2 episodes of Alice, 2 episodes of The Jeffersons. Loved those shows. And then I'd run downstairs, I'd get on my bike. I had a bicicleta back then. It was an Apollo Ross 5-speed. And I ended up getting it because we went on vacation one summer, and I had a red bike, my original red bike. That's the one I learned how to ride on. And one day on the street we were on, it was sand. So I didn't feel like pushing it through the sand, so I left it behind a bulldozer that was parked right against the fence. And that bulldozer was there all week, hadn't moved at all. So I left it there. I said, I'll walk, and then later when I want it, I'll come grab it. Well, a couple hours later, I was looking for my bike, and I kind of forgot for a second where I left it. I thought it was in the yard. I couldn't find it. I go, where's my bike? And then it clicked. I go, oh, yeah, I left it behind that massive bulldozer. And then when I looked out, the bulldozer was gone. And I could see on the ground something red and flat. And when I got there, my bike had been run over by the big fat wheels of this bulldozer and made it into a pancake. So my father was there that day, and I said, my bike. And he looked at it and goes, what happened? I said, what do you think happened? I go, that bulldozer that was there ran it over. So he goes, don't worry about it, I'll get you another one. And I thought he meant like right now. So I'm waiting, like 5 minutes go by. I go, we're gonna go? He's like, where? I said, I thought you said we were gonna get me a bike. And he's like, not now, he goes. Summer's almost done, get you, later on. So we get back to our home, our normal home. And I kept pushing him, we're going to get it. He goes, not now, winter's coming. He goes, why do you want to get it now? So I said, all right, I'm going to wait. So I waited, springtime came, and during that period from the fall time all the way to the springtime, I would go to the store that had bicycles, and I picked up the one I wanted. It was $179. And I said, this is the one. So every time we would go to that store, and it was like a Best Buy store, it had everything in it. I would go to that bike and check it out. Probably the salespeople would say, there's that kid again. There's that kid checking out that bike. So finally the day came, and we went and got the bike, and we were at the checkout line waiting for the bike to roll down in a box. And I was all excited, And the guy said, you can take it now if you want, or, I forget what he said, $10 or $25. He goes, we can put it together for you. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it tonight. And my father, because he knew he was the one that was going to put it together, he said, let them do it. They know what they're doing. They're going to do it right. So I thought about it for like, I don't know, a minute. And I said, all right. So we go home, and that night would not pass. I kept thinking about the bike. Finally, I fell asleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I fell asleep. Next day we went to the store, and the guy comes out with this cool Apollo Ross 5-speed bike, and I was so excited. My father tied it on top of the 1973 station wagon that he had, Chevy Impala, and we got to my house, and he unties it, puts it down on the ground, and I get on and I zoom away. And that's how it was, me and that bike. We were like joined at the hip, jointed it. We were joined at the hip, and I went, you name it, with that bike all over the place. And I had it like a car, driving it like it was a car. I was always imagining like I was coming back from a long trip with a passenger behind me, and we're arriving home, and I was trying to avoid the bumps so I wouldn't wake them up. So yeah, that's the bike I used to jump with. I would go on that street, but back then everything was a ramp. The Rock was a ramp. I would make ramps in the basement, which never lasted. Jumping off steps, that was another thing. Pick up speed, then jump off the steps. The sidewalk where the driveway opening is, where you have the two granite pieces, they have like a corner, and I would use that corner and do a bunny hop and leap up. Yeah, and in my imagination, when I would jump, like a really good jump, I felt like I was in the air for a long time. It's like, wow, look how high I am, look how long. The only thing we didn't do is videotape back then, or put it on film, which I wish we had done. That would have been good memories to play back. But I don't have any of those. But I do have the memories in my head. So I used to jump a lot, constantly. I have wiped out a few times. One time I jumped, I had this ramp, nice ramp, and I jumped really high. I was like all happy, look how high, boom. And then I landed really hard, and I wasn't holding strong enough, and I slipped in between, and I fell in between the chopper handlebars, and my shoulders were in between, and I was trying to balance the bike, and then I ended up wiping out and falling down on my face. And then another time I was jumping that granite rock, and I went really high up, and I landed on my front tire really hard, and I went over the handlebars and landed, and I scraped my elbow. on the side. Went home, did some repair work on my elbow. Fun times. Fun times. The years, though, they go by quickly. You don't notice it when you're younger. You're like, okay, I'm 14, I'm 14, I'm 15. Okay, I'm 18, I'm 20. You feel like there's a lot of time in front of you. And then at one point you wake up and you're like, wait a minute, I'm old now. You know, I'm not that spring chicken anymore. But it goes rapidly, it goes fast. I had a teacher in high school, and back then he would say it goes like this. It goes like this. One time, about 25 years ago, I was driving by the courthouses heading home, and there was a friend of mine who I went to high school with, and we also sat at the same, you're good friends when you share the lunch table together. So he was also at my lunch table, and he sees me and I see him, and he says to me, it goes like this. And he knew I knew what he meant. That was a quote from my teacher when he was telling us how fast the years go. Yeah, you wonder what, all those friends that you had back in high school are up to these days. It's a long time ago. And it was fun. Sometimes it wasn't fun, but I had fun in high school. I had a fun childhood. A lot of stuff, a lot of playing. I played enough for like 3 kids. That's how much I played. One time we broke into the rock quarry on a Sunday, and we climbed over the fence, me and 2 other kids, friends of mine, and we messed around with everything, rock piles, the equipment, and then at one point I got into this massive bulldozer. I was pushing buttons and everything, and all of a sudden it started up. It was like a tube of So I was thinking, watch this thing on its own shift into gear. And then, go through the fence in front of me and just take down the whole neighborhood. I couldn't stop it. I kept pushing, and then I was thinking, watch me hit a button that puts it into drive. So we kind of panicked and we left. I mean, it was secure. It was just running. It was in park and all that, but we left. And then there was this office building about, 600 yards away, and we would stop there as a pit stop to freshen up. We'd use the bathroom, and then we'd almost take like a shower in there. We'd wash our face. I mean, all the blackness would go down the sink, and then we'd wipe everything down, make sure it was nice and clean, and then we'd walk home. And nobody called the cops back then to say, hey, there's some kids, they're going to get hurt in that rock quarry. They'll probably let them get hurt. Learn the lesson. I should make more tea. But anything to pass the day. Yeah, today I was at Venice Beach. Not in the beach, but in that area. And we went and we had dinner. And it was good. Delicious food. And I'm looking at the food, and at first it's probably not going to be enough. I'm very hungry, and then towards the end, I'm like, oh man, I am stuffed. I wish I had a couch here. I'd lie down and take a nap for about an hour, digest. I'm done with the tea. I was thinking of that movie Rocky Balboa. Rocky, the original one, came out in '76. So the opening scene is at a church, You got Christ on the ceiling or whatever, and then they pan down and there's Rocky getting ready to fight Spider Rico. And you know, it's funny now. I look at Sylvester Stallone now when I see like images of Rocky, and I just can't buy it anymore in terms of the size of the man. You know, he looks to me more like he should have been like a welterweight or a middleweight. He's a small guy, you know, and he's playing a heavyweight. You know, when I was a kid watching that, because you're small back then, he looked like a heavyweight to me. He looked like a heavyweight, and I was like, yeah, that's what heavyweights look like. They look like that size. He looked tall, you know, 5'10", somewhere around there, 6 feet. And he looked, you know, big enough to play a heavyweight. Now I see it, and he looks too thin, too small to play a heavyweight, and it's just not believable anymore. You know, I still enjoy the movie and the story, but back then it was very believable to me that this man named Sylvester Stallone was playing a heavyweight. In reality, he didn't have the height, you know, and he didn't have the weight to play a heavyweight. Now, you could be 5'5" and weigh 200 pounds, 220, and play a heavyweight, but he was thin. He was thin, and no longer can you be fooled by it, because when you see him in the movie, he looks like he's thin, especially in Rocky 3. You know, Rocky 3, he should have been a little bit heavier than that. That was just way too thin. You know, way too thin. He wanted to give this David and Goliath appearance. You know, and the other thing, big waste of time working out to that level. I mean, okay, go in there and in shape, or go do some jogging, some jump rope or whatever, and look like a boxer. But you don't have to look like a bodybuilder who's boxing. That's just totally ridiculous. You know, he should have gone in there, you know, a weight that he didn't look flabby. But he didn't have to go in there with all that, you know, muscle, and, you know, for what reason? Boxers don't look like that. And if they do, it's very few. Very few. They're in shape, but they're not overly developed. So I don't know why he thought it was better to look that way, especially in those days. Like now there's a few guys that kind of look like that. But back in those days when he was creating the movie Rocky, nobody looked like that in the ring except Ken Norton. So, you know, I don't know why he even wasted his time doing that. He should have just been a decent weight, trim, you know, but not too trim. You know what I'm saying? Because in Rocky 3, he looked like olive oil. Very thin. And like I said, big waste of time working out for months and months just for that 10 minutes of fighting at the end. You know, nobody, you know, you see Larry Holmes, how he looked? Larry Holmes trained a lot, Rocky Marciano. Yeah, Mike Tyson was muscular, but I think he just naturally had that look. It's one of those people that they look at weights and they get bulky. But Stallone didn't have to do that. If he kept the body he had in Rocky 1 throughout the entire series, that would have been fine. That's what you're supposed to look like as a boxer. The way he looked like in Rocky 1, not the way he looked like in Rocky 4, fighting the Russian. Good movie, 1, 2, 3, great. They kind of look like reality of the way a boxer would be. Then you get to 4. A cat. Then you get to 4. Yeah, it's entertaining, but it's not realistic. It has nothing to do with the first 3 Rockies. You know, I mean, what is this guy? All of a sudden, Rocky is that incredible that he's going to fight this machine, the Soviet. Yeah, ridiculous. And then 5 was just horrendous. When I went to see 5, I was so disappointed. First of all, his acting was horrible. Was that over the top, jittery, jumpy? You know, what do you mean? Why would you be acting that way with brain damage? People with brain damage talk a lot slower. You don't see Tommy Hearns or Muhammad Ali or any of those people that have, you know, neurological issues from the punches. And we don't know. maybe those people would have had that kind of outcome in life anyway. There are people that become like that without boxing. But boxing, obviously doesn't help, getting punched in the head like that. But, yeah, I mean, they're like, yeah, you've suffered brain damage. And he's talking fast. I've never heard that. You have brain damage and your speech increases in speed. And then they told him, you can't box. We've run the tests. And then, all of a sudden in Rocky Balboa, yeah, those ridiculous tests were not sophisticated enough. We've done really good tests now, and you're fine. You continue boxing, even though the Soviet, was hitting you with 2,500 pounds per square inch of punches, but you're fine. So he was able to fight again. And I didn't like, the story was fine, but I didn't like the guy he fought, Antonio Tarver. Not impressed with that. And then in Creed, the first one, he says, Adonis says to him, he explains who he is, and then he asks him, I heard there was a fight between you and Apollo, a third fight. And then Rocky says, how you know all this? And he goes, yeah, who won that? He asks him. He says, he did. Kind of ridiculous. I mean, that Kugler, that's ridiculous. Really, Apollo won that. He couldn't beat him in the ring both times. The first time he got the decision, a split decision, but he didn't deserve it because Rocky beat him. Right? The second time Rocky beat him, and you're telling me a few years have passed, Rocky now is trained with Apollo, knows all of his tricks of fighting, and yet without much training or sparring or anything, Apollo gets in there and he beats the crap out of Rocky. That is asinine. They shouldn't have even put that they should have just ignored that. And, oh yeah, we're going to say that Apollo won the third fight, really? How? Stupid. That was like asinine. And I keep thinking, why'd you guys put that nonsense in there? I mean, okay, it's a movie, but there's no way in reality. In reality, Apollo would have lost again. And what kind of fight did they have? Got a little baby bruise here when he gets home in Rocky 4. His son asks him, who gave you the hat? He goes, friend. He says, who gave you the black eye? He goes, same friend. It's a little baby, it's almost like it's self-inflicted. Little baby bruise here. And that's how Apollo beat you. You're willing to go all out in the next fight, which is against the Russian. You're willing to go all out against Clubber Lang. You're willing to go all out against all the other guys that you fought. But this rematch in secrecy at the gym there against Apollo, you lost just by a little swollen eye. Asinine. So he asks him, I heard there was a fight, who won it? And he goes, he did. I'm like, that is so stupid. They should never. Stallone should have said, I'm not saying that. That's asinine. He should have said, we never really fought. We did that whole thing where we freeze, and then I yelled, cut. And that was the end of it. There was no fight. Apollo beat him. And even that, I'll train you, but there's one thing you have to do for me, a favor. He's like, what favor? You don't need that. You can say, I'm going to train you for the glory of the past. I want you to succeed. The way you beat me, I want you to beat this Clubber Lang guy. And I've said this a million times. Clubber Lang was the good guy in that movie. They were denying him a shot at the title that he deserved. He deserved it. He's ranked number one. The number one guy gets the shot. And they were ignoring him. They were like, yeah, you're not going to fight. Not even going to mention that, Mickey was like, trying to hide Clubber Lang from Rocky. Doesn't Rocky, listen to the news? Like they say, there's a guy, on CNN or whatever they had back then as a news source. Nobody said, hey, there's some guy with a mohawk. He wants to fight you. Don't you know about this? And then, Rocky would have been like, I don't know anything about this. Well, they would have said, why don't you pick up a KO magazine or a Ring magazine or something about boxing, and you'll see he's in there. He wants to fight you. He's all surprised, And in Rocky 3, they're actually playing a theme song from Rocky at that statue unveiling. They're going to unveil the statue, and the band is playing Gonna Fly Now by Bill Conti. Ridiculous. Why would the theme song from Rocky be known to the band that's playing at the ceremony where they dedicate the statue to Rocky, or to the city of Philadelphia, whatever? Asinine. Anyway, I want to make more tea. That was not enough for me. I need a little bit more tea. And then, what time is it? Yeah, it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Saturday morning, 1 a.m. All right. That's it for now. Ciao.